جزاكم الله خير. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وبارك على الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد، فبارك الله فيكم، حياكم الله. in relation to the lesson today, or this jalsa today, then it's going to be a short discussion regarding some of the ahkam revolving around siyam, revolving around fasting, as opposed to what was maybe advertised, which was a continuation of Sharh Sunnah of Al-Bahari. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, the intent is to continue with that after Ramadan, inshallah. And what we wish to do in the lead up to Ramadan will be munasabah, due to the fact that we are fast approaching the month of Ramadan. And if I'm correct, then it's possible that this time next week we could be looking at the possibility of praying the first night of Taraweeh, Salat al-Taraweeh. And so, with that, it's always important to refer to the ahkam, the rulings in relation to the ibadat. Anything you want to do to qaraban ila Allah, and seeking nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then of course it should be an action based upon ilm, should be action based upon knowledge. And fasting is no different. Fasting is no different. When a person should seek to fast, and that fasting should be based upon ilm from the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so what we intend to do is to read through some of these ahkam mentioned here in Umdatul-Fiqh, the book that we're going through generally in the fiqh lesson, and just take from what we can in relation to what's referred to as the Ru'us Aqlam, the main central points of the text, and understand some of the rulings in relation to that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So Ibn Qudama, rahimahullah, he begins by mentioning the title of the chapter, Kitab al-Siyam. Kitab al-Siyam. The chapter referring to the fasting, the chapter of fasting. And the Siyam, fasting, Siyam, like anything, when we wish to discuss a particular topic, we begin by discussing its ta'rif, discussing its definition. What does it mean? And generally when we discuss a ta'rif, definition of something, we discuss it lughatan wa shar'an. We discuss its definition. Firstly, its linguistic definition. What does it mean in terms of the Arabic language? And its definition in the shar', its definition in the sharia. And so, with a siyam, with the fasting, then siyam, lughatan, refers to imsak, withholding. Na'am, imsak, withholding from something. And this could be withholding from food, from speech. Na'am, there's a person withholding from a particular action. As for shar'an, the siyam, the fasting in the sharia, is imsak bin niyya and ashya makhsusa. Na'am, so it's imsak with the niyya and the akl, and in the muftirat من طلوع الفجر الثاني إلى غروب الشمس. And so, fasting in the Sharia is withholding with the intention from the particular things that break the fast from the Tulu' Fajr al-Thani, so the dawn break, the second dawn break, until the Ghurub al-Shams, until the sunset. And so, this is the definition. And you can say that this definition of the fast in the Sharia can be broken down into different shurut, if you like. Different conditions that need to be fulfilled. That each of these things need to be fulfilled in order for it to be said that the person is fasting in accordance to the Sharia. So the first thing mentioned was what? With the niyyah. So the first thing, if a person fasts, they must fast in accordance with the correct intention. They have intention to fast. They have intention to fast. And so, what this necessitates is that if a person does not have the intention, then the person has not fasted in accordance with the Sharia. So, for example, a person he doesn't eat or drink, and it so happens he realizes he doesn't eat or drink for the whole day, and it just so happens that he starts to eat and drink after Maghrib. So, in this scenario, it cannot be said that the person sa'im shar'an, that the person is a fasting individual in accordance with the Sharia. Why? Because he did not have the intention. Now, he did not have the intention. And so, the first thing is that the person must have the intention. The second we mentioned in the definition was what?
What he doesn't do.
Now, he stays away from the muftarat. He stays away from the things that break the fast. Now, the muftarat, the things that break the fast, are of two types. Now, you have the things that are muftarat, that are the major things that break the fast. And then you have the things that are the muftarat, hissiyan, and the things that break the fast, ma'nawiyan. Yeah, and then the minor things that break the fast. There are two types. Things that directly break the fast and things that break the fast in meaning, or in a minor sense. Things that break the fast, specifically and literally, are, for example, eating, drinking, and sexual relations, for example. These are the things that break the fast specifically. As for the things that break the person's fast, ma'nawiyan, meaning, then these are the actions that render the person's fast deficient. For example, al-qawl az-zur, full speech, and as mentioned in the hadith, وَعَمَلُ بِهِ, when acted upon it. So, generally speaking, a person engaged in the muharramat, a person engaged in actions which are haram, then this contributes, each of these things contribute to render the person's fast deficient. As for the first category, if a person engages in any of these, then it nullifies the person's fast. So, for example, the person eats during the time when they're supposed to be fasting, and it nullifies the fast. Or they drink, nullifies the fast. As for if the person engaged in full speech, مثلا riba, backbiting, or kadhib, lying, then this would render the person's fast deficient, however, not muharram, or not wouldn't nullify the fast itself in totality. So, this is the fast. This is the second thing that we mentioned, al-muftarat. The third thing we mentioned,
from the time of Fajr until sunset.
from the time of, we mentioned specifically,
Second dawn.
The
second dawn.
the second dawn. Now, the second Fajr, the Fajr Thani. Naam. Also referred to as the Fajr Sadiq, the true dawn. Naam. It's important to distinguish between them. Why? Because there's essentially two Fajrs. Naam, the dawn break, the first one, and you have the second one. And it's important to distinguish between the two as to when the person, performs or begins their fast, and when the time of Fajr truly begins. How do you distinguish between the two?
The type of light you see.
نعم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر. Now, but what is that khayt al-abyad? There's something about specific about that white thread.
Is it the type of light you see?
It's a type of light. Now,
So the false fajr comes up vertically,
I forget as well sometimes. That's all. Difference between the two.
and the true fajr comes across.
Now, this is the difference. So if we're speaking about the false dawn, now the false dawn, the false fajr, then the light, the break of the light is vertical. Now, it's vertical. As for the true dawn, which is the second one, then the breakage of light is horizontal. Now, this is how it occurs. So, and this is how it occurs. This is when the breakage of light is horizontal, the true fajr, then this is the beginning of the waqt, the time of the fast. واضح? طيب, what else did we mention as well? We mentioned the طلوع الفجر الثاني and الغروب الشمس, until the sun sets. Now the sun set. As we mentioned, the sun set, then this is clear and it's apparent. And when the sun actually sets, then this is the end of the time of the fast. This is the fast in accordance with the Sharia. Naam. This is the fast in accordance with the Sharia. Shaykh Ubaid, rahimahullah, he mentions as well, it's important to distinguish the fast in accordance with the Sharia from fasts of other individuals. For example, the Siyam al-Siyasiyin. The Siyam al-Siyasiyin. The political fast. What do you think this is referring to, Barakallahu Feekum? Hunger strikes. Naam. So a person, he goes on a hunger strike. And this is his fast. Right? He goes on a hunger strike. This is not a fast in accordance with the Sharia. Why not?
It's not the legislation.
It's of course it's opposing to the Sunnah, of course. But if we go back to those four things we mentioned, intention. Naam. The niyyah is not in the niyyah of ibadah or taqarrub Allah. The niyyah is one of siyasa, and to make a political point. And this is not something which, of course, is affirmed in our deen, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. So as for the fast itself, then Ibn Qudama mentions ويجب الصيام رمضان على كل مسلم بالغ عاقل قادر على الصوم. And so he mentions it's an obligation. The fast is an obligation upon every Muslim, baligh, the one that has reached puberty, aqil, the one that is of sound mind, qadir ala sawm, the one that has the ability to perform the fast. So these are the individuals that the fast is an obligation upon. So first we said it's an obligation upon who?
The one who's reached puberty.
Someone before that? The Muslim. The Muslim. So this excludes who? The kafir. This excludes the kafir. What does this mean? What does this mean? If we say it's an obligation upon the Muslim, does it mean it's not obligation upon the kafir?
No, it won't benefit them because they're not Muslim.
No, it won't benefit them. Tell you. Was it obligation upon him?
Yeah.
Exactly. So when it mentions obligation, then we're referring to as an obligation upon these individuals, and if they fulfill it, then they're rewarded for it. Naam. So when we mention the Muslim, meaning that the Muslim, if he does it, he's rewarded for it. Not that the one that's excluded from it, i.e. in this case the kafir, is exempt from the obligation. Allah Ta'ala knows best. It's a discussion amongst Ahlul Ilm, and there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. But that which is stronger, Allah Ta'ala knows best, is that the kuffar, hum makhatabin, they are addressed and they are still responsible for fulfilling the actions of ibadah. Naam. And the reality is this really indicates the evil of the position that they find themselves in. For indeed, if there are people, if the person's a kafir, and he performs the action, then he's performed the action, but there's no reward for it. There's no reward for it. So there's no khair that comes his way by way of it. However, if he doesn't perform the action, he may be punished for it. So there's no khair that comes his way. And so it's just a snippet, if you like, or a small look at the reality of the kafir. Naam, that his existence is one that does not bring about benefit for him in the akhirah, irrespective of any action that he does, unless he accepts the tawheed of Allah Ta'ala and embraces Islam and worships Allah Ta'ala alone. If this is not fulfilled, then he has nothing but trying to or performing actions that will repel punishment for him, but he won't be rewarded for it. So the first, which is the Muslim. The first, which is the Muslim, barakallahu feekum. That's the first individuals upon. Then we said who? Or we mentioned, Ibn Qudama mentions who? The Baligh. Naam, the one that has reached bulugh. The one that has reached puberty. And puberty is established by how?
Physical signs and mental.
Physical signs, for example.
Body hair.
Bodily hair, now around the private parts, for example.
For the women, the menstrual cycle.
For the women, now, the beginning of the menstrual cycle. What else? Reaching the age of 15. Now, why 15? Aywa. It's the age in which Abdullah ibn Umar was permitted to fight in jihad. And so this is derived from this, that this is the age of puberty, when the person, if any of the signs have not been fulfilled before that, then they can, once they reach the age of 15, then this is when they have reached bulugh, if the other signs haven't been fulfilled. Now, it's only one of those signs. Likewise as well, if the person has a wet dream, it's a wet dream, and it's as a result of shahwa, the desire, then this again is an indication of puberty. And in this case, it becomes an obligation for the person to fast. طيب, aqil, the one that's aqil, this excludes who? The one that's majnoon. Essentially the one that's majnoon, the one that is does not have, is devoid of his sanity. And then Ibn Qudama mentions qadir ala sawm. Qadir ala sawm, has the ability to fast. And the one that has the ability to fast. So who does this exclude then?
If you have a sickness that stops you from being able to fast.
So the murid.
Trouble.
So the murid, the one that has a sickness, and the one that is murid is of two types. The one that's sick is of two types. The one that has a sickness, وَلَا يُرْجَى بْرُعَهُ. So he has a sickness and is what was referred to as a chronic illness. So this illness it's not anticipated that he will be cured of this illness. Of course, Allah Ta'ala, ala kulli shay'in qadir. However, from what is understood of that, the nature of that person's illness is not understood and it's not anticipated that he'll be cured of that illness. That's what we refer to as cause of chronic illnesses. And that particular illness prevents him from fasting. Then you have the person that has an illness and it is anticipated that they may be cured of that illness. Now, these are the two differences. Why is it important to distinguish between these two?
Or making up the fast.
To making up the fast? Now, essentially, how it's expiated for. Now, how it's expiated. So, for the first individual, barakallahu feekum, where it's not anticipated that they'll be cured for now, it's a chronic illness. Then what is done?
Feed a poor person each day.
Now, they pay the fidya for each day. They feed the poor person each day. As for the individual that is anticipated he may become better, then what is done in this case?
Makes them up.
Al-Qadha. He makes up those days. Now, he makes up those days of the fast. Now, so after Ibn Qudama he mentions وَيُؤْمَرُ بِهِ الصَّبِي إِذَا أَطَاقَهُ. Now, and so he mentions as for the Sabi, the child, then he's commanded with it. Now, he's commanded with it if he has the ability to do so. The child is commanded with it if he has the ability to do so. So, with these ibarat, with these sentences and these phrases here, Ibn Qudama makes a distinction between the two. So, if you notice, he mentions first, يَجِبُ عَلَى فُلَانُ وَفُلَانُ وَفُلَانُ وَفُلَانُ. Now, it's an obligation upon so-and-so. Then he mentions وَيُؤْمَرُ, and then so-and-so is commanded, the child is commanded. There's a distinction between the two. Why? Because when it comes to those that it's an obligation upon, it's an obligation upon them shar'an. So, it's obligatory. Meaning that if they do it, inshallah they're rewarded for it. And if they don't do it, then they are blameworthy for not doing so. And so that is the individual that is Muslim, Baligh, Aqil, Yani Qadir. Makes sense? As for when it mentions the Sabi, the child, then it mentions the child is commanded to fast. Now, if he has the ability to do so. The command to fast, Yani, yu'maru, and it's referring to who's the Amir, who's the one that's commanded? The parents in this regard. Now, the parents. Not that it's a command, Yani, from the Shari'. It's not a command, Yani, Shar'an. However, these things are meant, this is mentioned here due to the fact that, as mentioned by Shaykh Uthaymeen, that this particular action of fasting is commanded for the child to do by the parents, so that the child, يتعود عليه, the child becomes used to the action of fasting. And so it's not a case of as soon as it becomes an obligation that this action of fasting may become thaqeel upon the individual and difficult upon the individual. Why? Because generally speaking, when it becomes an obligation upon a person will be at the time of bulugh. So it could be a case that 1 year in the scenario, let's say where he wasn't commanded, he hasn't fasted, hasn't had any experience of fasting and suhoor and the difficulties and the sabr that is required sometimes with fasting. And so then with that, the individual, he sees one of the signs of bulugh rather. Now, one of the signs of bulugh. And then now the next year fasting is an obligation upon him. It's no longer an affair of it being recommended for him to do so, but it's an obligation for him to do so now. And if he doesn't fast, he's blameworthy. This can become thaqeel upon the individual. This may be something heavy upon the person. So, due to that, this is why this particular command, which is command which is tarbawi, a command in cultivating the child, is commanded or is recommended that you command the child to do so. Likewise as well, when it comes to the hukum of the fast of Ramadan, as we mentioned, if it's upon these individuals, then it's an obligation. Now it's an obligation to fulfill. Anyone that does not fast, now, then, as Shaykh Uthaymeen, he also mentions, the one that does not fast, rejecting his obligation for huwa kafirun. So the one that leaves off fasting, at the fast of Ramadan, and they reject that it's an obligation to fast, then such an individual has disbelieved. Similar to the other obligations, from the arkan, for example, the salah. Now, that which we've discussed previously in terms of the salah as well, is that if the person was to leave off the salah, rejecting his obligation. Now, leave off the salah, rejecting his obligation, then this person, kafir bil ijma'. This person has fallen into disbelief, and there's consensus in that regard. So this is in relation to the fast, or who the fast is upon. As for the month of Ramadan, or as for the beginning of the fast of Ramadan, then this is established by way of the ru'ya of the hilal, seeing the hilal of Ramadan, or by way of completing 30 days of Sha'ban. Now, so Ibn Qudamah mentions three things, but the two of those three are essentially one and the same. So if now it's unclear, you cannot see the hilal, the crescent moon for Ramadan, then you complete the 30 days of Sha'ban. So, as for the ru'ya, the sighting of the moon, then the sighting of the moon is established how? The sighting of the moon for Ramadan is established how? Trustworthy witness, how many? One. So as for the sight of the moon for Ramadan, then it is one trustworthy witness. As for the sighting of the hilal for Shawwal, then it's how many? Two. Now I'm two. So, in order to establish the beginning of Ramadan, you need one trustworthy sighting. And in order to establish the sighting for the month of Shawwal, at the end of Ramadan, the beginning of Eid, then you need two. Now, you need two. And Shaykh Ubaydi mentions the reason for that, or the reason why it's distinguished between the two, is because as for the sighting of the beginning of Ramadan, and this is a dukhul fil ibadah, you're entering into ibadah, so you can suffice with one. However, you need two witnesses in order to leave that ibadah, because the action of, or the beginning of Shawwal and the end of Ramadan essentially is leaving action of ibadah. And so, for added emphasis, it would require two trustworthy witnesses. And so this is why you find that there's a distinction between the two. There's a distinction between the two. So, thereafter, it mentions, Ibn Qudama also mentioned the muftirin for Ramadan, those that break the fast in Ramadan. And they are of 4 types. The individuals that break the fast in Ramadan are of 4 types. And so, the first is the مريض الذي يتضرع به والمسافر الذي له قصر فالفطر لهما أفضل. نعم وعليهما القضاء وإن صام أجزاءهما. So the first of these is the murid, the one that's sick, that may be harmed. Meaning that by way of him fasting, his fast قد يتأخر الشفاء, that his fast may contribute to or it may prolong his cure, prolong him getting better. Likewise, you have the musafir الذي له قصر, the musafir that is permitted to shorten the salah. And Ibn Qudama mentions for these 2 individuals, al-fitr lahuma afdal wa alayhima al-qada. Wa alayhima al-qada. So for these 2 individuals, breaking the fast is better. For these 2 individuals, breaking the fast is better. And the proof for that is the narration, عليكم برخص الله التي رخص لكم. Upon you are the allowances of Allah Ta'ala which He has permitted and allowed for you. I adhere to these allowances, I adhere to these permissions. And so, if a person does take that rukhsah, if a person does take that rukhsah from Allah, either he's allowed to break the fast if he's traveling, or allowed to break the fast whilst sick, then this is better for him. Better for him. However, alayhi al-qada, upon him is to make up that fast. Upon him is to make up that fast. And if the person was to continue to fast, then they are rewarded anyway. If the person continues to fast, then they are rewarded anyway. One point to mention here, barakallahu feekum, is that put aside the murid, but the musafir, some Ahlul Ilm, they mention that the musafir has to be the one that is upon a genuine journey. A genuine journey. And he's not the musafir that is traveling for what purpose? For sin, or to break the fast. So he says, okay, if I know, use the example of Manchester, he says, okay, I know, and if I go to Birmingham, I can break my fast. So he goes to Birmingham just to break the fast. So this is not a legislated reason. A person cannot travel, if a person is traveling for, as the Prophet mentions as well, Jazakallah khair, for specifically ma'asi, in the disobedience, or he's traveling for the intention of breaking the fast, then it's not permitted for the person to break the fast for that reason. Rather the person has to have a genuine reason to travel. A genuine reason to travel. And it could be any reason. The Bible is wasi, but it cannot be a case of the person is just genuinely traveling because he wants to break the fast. So, for example, a person, he may travel for the purpose which is mubah, and he's travelling for a holiday or the right likes of that. Now, because he's not travelling for that purpose of just breaking the fast, then the person is permitted to break the fast during the journey. But it's not a case of now that he مثلا, he makes sure he books his holiday in Ramadan. He makes sure he travels in Ramadan because he finds fasting difficult, مثلا. لا يجوز. No, he's not permitted to do so. So that's the first type, barakallahu fikum. Then you have the ha'id wa nufasa. So you have the second type of the individual that breaks the fast. There's the ha'id, the menstruating woman, and the woman with the postnatal bleeding. These two, as mentioned by Ibn Qudama, tuftiran wa taqdiyan. These two break the fast, so they don't fast. So a woman does not fast whilst menstruating. And taqdiyan, likewise, they make up the fast. With samata lam yujzihima. And if they were to continue to fast, they will not be rewarded for that. No, they will not be rewarded for that. Do you understand what is meant by they will not be rewarded for that? What does that mean? If you say, when you find the ibarah, مثلا, لم يجزئهما. What is meant by that? The obligation has been fulfilled, so then? They're still going to have to fast. No, they're still going to have to fast. So, for example, the woman is menstruating, and she says, I'm just going to fast anyway. Like, she says, I feel fine, I'm going to fast anyway. This action of her fasting, in reality, is not fulfilling the fast of fulfilling the fast of Ramadan. So, even though she's done that action, lem tajzi, meaning that she will have to make up that fast anyway. She's going to have to make up the fast, and if she was to fulfill the fast for whatever reason, she's still going to have to make up that fast. Now, as opposed to the first category that we mentioned, the first category we mentioned was the one that's on a journey. So, for example, the person's on a journey, and we said what is better for them to do is to break the fast. So we said better, but not that they have to break the fast. So the person is on the journey. He says, "Now I'm going to continue to fast while I'm traveling." So, and then he fasts. He's rewarded for that. He's rewarded for that, meaning that he doesn't have to make up that day. Still, now that makes sense. Barakallahu feekum. So then we have the third. The third category is the hamil or the murdi'. So we have the pregnant woman or the breastfeeding woman. And it mentions in khafata ala waladayhima aftarata or aftarata وقدرتها وأطعمتها عن كل يوم مسكين وإن صامتا أجزأهما. طيب. So, in relation to the third, if the third is the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding woman. And this is now, it mentions, if they fear for their respective child. Now, they fear for their respective child. And what would that fear genuinely be? But what are they fearing though? In terms of by what fasting, then fasting will cause what?
Oh, this kind of just.
Possibly, but obviously the worst case scenario now that of severe harm to the child. But really referring to the fact that if they do not, if the pregnant woman or the breastfeeding woman fast, then this will bring about a lack of nutrients for that child. Now, a lack of nutrients for the child, whether it be the janeen, the fetus, or whether it be the radi', the breastfeeding child. So, as they mentioned, Sheikh Ubaid, rahimahullah, he mentioned the same. As for, specifically, he refers to the hamil. As for the pregnant woman, then this has to be established by a tabib that is trustworthy, a trustworthy doctor. Naam. And it cannot just be the case that the woman says, because, yani, halaha, just because she is hamil, just because she is pregnant, that now she has the rukhsah of not fasting. No, rather it has to be something which is ascertained. And ascertained by way of the trustworthy doctor. Of course, as we refer to trustworthiness, then this begins with what? Islam. That the doctor should be a Muslim doctor. Reason for this as well, first and foremost, as you mentioned, our fiqh, in terms of diyana, and in terms of our religion and religiousness, and the fiqh, trustworthiness with someone, begins with Islam. You cannot say that fulan fiqh kafir. Impossible. Naam. It's these two things are oxymorons, if you like. These things they can't go together. So, if now we say that a person is a doctor, then we have to say, okay, it's a Muslim doctor. Also, the reason why we say a Muslim doctor, irrespective of the fact that trustworthiness begins with a person's Islam, also the Muslim doctor is the one that understands the ahkam of fasting and the fadl of fasting. And the non-Muslim doctor, he may just give advice, but that advice is just a genuine advice that is not in the context of Islam. So they just they advise the woman don't eat or drink, or don't fast rather. No, don't fast. Not understanding that the fadl of fasting itself. And to say just do, can't you do it in this month? Can't you change Ramadan to this month for yourself or whatever? Based on jahl, not understanding in the context of fadl of fasting. So in this regard, then the pregnant woman, as Sheikh Ubaid mentioned specifically, the pregnant woman, then she gets this established by way of a trustworthy doctor. And so, if now there's genuine fear for the child and the child being nourished, then they perform, or they break the fast, they don't fast, and they make up the fast, or they feed for each day a miskin. They feed a poor person each day. So this is essentially, as we mentioned, the two types of murid. They fall between the two of them. And so they could be from those that make up the days, or they could be from those that feed the miskin, feed the poor person for the days that they have not fasted. And essentially, you may find that, generally speaking, it will be a case that they will make up those days. Afwan, they will feed the person for those days. Why? Because the ahkam surrounding the person that is breastfeeding, or the one that is pregnant is more similar to the one that has a long-term illness, an ahkam around them. And so that which is bringing about yani, weakness to the body, or that which is bringing about the hardship, whether it be the breastfeeding, whether it be the pregnancy, this is more long-term. Right? It's something that spans over months, and in the case of breastfeeding, years. So with that, the ahkam surrounding it are closer to those that have the long-term illness, the chronic illness. Even though, of course, not chronic illness, and it's not an illness in of itself. Allah Ta'ala knows best. So that's the third. That's the third. As for the fourth, is the one which is ajiz and a siyam, the one that is not able to fast. The one that is not able to fast. And they're not able to fast due to kibr sin, yani old age, or an individual that has a chronic illness. Generally speaking, Allah Ta'ala knows best, generally speaking, these two things become one and the same anyway. That a person has a chronic illness due to old age. And it's not just the old age that is preventing them, but usually that due to them reaching the later stage of their life, that they end up having it, and they are afflicted with more illnesses, and some of them illnesses may become chronic illnesses. And so, in that regard, these individuals, they it's not expected that they can fast. It's not expected that they can perform the fast. And so, in this regard, they pay the fidya, and they perform, or they pay to feed a miskin kulli yawm, every day, to feed the miskin. So, with this as well, as we discussed this, I believe, in Kitab al-Zakah, for those that were here with us in Kitab al-Zakah. Who is the miskin? Who is the miskin? What's the difference between the faqir and the miskin? The one that's faqir and the one that's miskin. Whose hal is more severe, first and foremost? The faqir. The faqir. What's the difference between the two?
The miskin might just be able to get by with his income and his outgoings, but the faqir, his outgoings will be more than his income.
No, essentially. So, with the miskin, that which he earns and that which is the things that he is responsible for paying for may be one and the same. So they say in English, he breaks even. No. So if he looks at his bank account, end of the month is zero. Faqir, for example, is that his expenses, or that which is responsible for paying, is more than he earns. So he essentially is, again, as they say, he's in the red. So he's in deficit. He's always in deficit in terms of his finances. So why does it mention here the miskin then? Why do you find where it mentions to feed an individual, you feed the miskin? Why is it mentioned the miskin, not the faqir? If you need it more. إذا اجتمع افترق اجتمع. That's one thing. Now, so principally, if they are mentioned separately, then they mean the same, one and the same. So if you just see miskin mentioned alone, then it's referring to the miskin and the faqir. Or if you see the faqir mentioned alone, then it's again referring to the miskin and the faqir. If you see them mentioned together, then they have different meanings. That's one reason. Another reason.
If the miskin miskin is eligible, then the fakir would.
Now, if we mention the miskin, you pay for the miskin, then min bab awla, you're going to pay for the fakir. It goes without saying you're going to pay for the fakir. If this one, his hal is slightly better, and he's eligible to be fed during these days of Ramadan, then of course the one fil aswa al hal, the one that is in a worse scenario, is going to be even more eligible. And so it's a case of the fact that it's the fakir is not mentioned doesn't now omit him from this particular ruling. Rather, we understand it's been bad awla. So the one that is in a better hal, if he's eligible, then of course the one in the worst hal is also eligible. So, also, barakallahu feekum, when it mentions I'm making up the fast, then we understand that the person makes up the fast, al-qadha is from the types of fast, and what is the ruling on qadha? Is it wajib, mustahab, mubah, makruh, haram? Wajib. Naam, it's wajib, it's obligation. So then what is required from that then? In terms of intention. What is required from that in terms of intention?
To make up for those fasts.
When do you make the intention?
As soon as you're able.
As soon as you're able. Before Fajr.
The second Fajr.
Before the second Fajr. So, essentially, we have narration. The Prophet ﷺ informs us that the intention of the fast should be made in the night before the fast. It's kadalik. You have another narration in which the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, a narration of Aisha, when the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam made the intention of the fast during the day. So, the jump between the two narrations, how you combine between the two narrations in terms of the hukum, is that if the fast is an obligatory fast, then you make the intention the night before the fast. So any time before Fajr. Naam. If the fast is a fast which is mustahab, or is from the nawafil, a voluntary fast, then you can make it after Fajr. Now you can make it after Fajr. So now, going back to what we were discussing regarding the qadha, the fast is made, or the qadha is obligatory fast. So the intention has to be made before Fajr. Because it's an obligatory fast. Because you're making up the fast of Ramadan. Now, does that make sense? Jay, whilst on the affair of intention as well, what is the correct time to make the intention for the fast of Ramadan? Is it obligatory the person has to make the intention every night before the next day of fasting? Or is it sufficient that they can make the intention at the beginning of Ramadan and it suffices for the whole month? You said the beginning of Ramadan? You agree, Zay? You agree?
Unless you have like a break in the middle, say you're unwell, you don't know when you're going to fast again, then you have to.
So if a break and you're unwell,
Yeah, so.
and you don't know when you're going to fast again?
At the beginning of Ramadan, you'll do it. So then your intention is to fast the month of Ramadan.
No.
That's the thing. But if you broke in the middle, for
Yeah.
example, ill or traveling
No.
or something like that, then you would renew your sort of intention when you were going to start the fasting again.
No, بالضبط. Exactly that. And it's mentioned, I only mentioned this, and from them is the speech of Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, in his book Sharh al-Mumta'. And he mentions that the intention, the person makes the intention at the beginning of the month of Ramadan. Why? Because at the beginning of the month of Ramadan, they intend to fast the whole month. Now, it's not a case of the person begins the month of Ramadan and they intend, I'm going to fast the 10th, I might fast the 15th. No, of course, they intend to fast the whole month. That's the action of fasting the month of Ramadan. However, now, if they fast the whole month, then they completed that fast and that initial intention suffices. However, as the Prophet mentions, if it's a case of he breaks the fast in the middle. Naam. So, for example, he fasts the 1st to the 10th. Or the 11th to the 12th, he goes on a journey. He travels. Then when he resumes fasting again, he has to make that intention again to complete that fast. Complete the rest of those days. Now, so if it's broken by something, of course, like a legislative reason for breaking the fast, then he renews the intention and fasts again. And continues his fast. If it's not broken by anything, then it's sufficient for him to fast. Now, or to make that intention and fast for that with that one intention. So, in that same scenario, barakallahu fikum, the individual, he breaks the fast. Again, we said the 11th, and he resumes fasting on the 13th. When does he make that intention?
The 12th, night time. So the night before.
The night of the 13th. The night of the 13th, basically. You're saying the night before. Now, so the night before, because it's obligatory fast that's going to come up after the 13th day. Because it's obligatory fast, he makes that intention for that day. Naam, واضح. جيد. خلاص, final thing we want to discuss is some of the things that break the person's fast. And from the things that break the person's fast is eating, drinking, consuming something that reaches the stomach, and then Ibn Khudayr mentions min ay mawdi'in kan, irrespective of whatever it is. If it reaches the stomach, then it breaks the fast. He mentions as well istiqa'. And so the person voluntarily vomiting. The person voluntarily vomiting. And istimna', the person voluntarily ejaculating. And of course, it's referring to what they call al-'ada sirriya, akramakum Allah. Naam. The person voluntarily ejaculating. Or the person kissing or touching with desire, and it causes the emission of semen. Likewise, the person looking at something with desire, يعني كرر another حتى أنزل. So he looks at something and he continuously looking with desire until it causes the individual to ejaculate. Or the person does hijam removes the blood عاملا ذاكرا. So they do so deliberately whilst knowing as well. They remember. Then these are the things that nullify the person's fast. Now these are the things that nullify the person's fast. So, essentially, when we talk about the things that nullify an individual's fast, then they can be divided into two types. They can be divided into two types. I was talking about the things that nullify the fast. So not the things that render the fast deficient, but nullify the fast. They can be divided into two types. Essentially, the sa'im physically should remain in the same hal. He shouldn't do anything to increase quwwah, increase strength, and he shouldn't do anything to deplete his strength. Now, so, with the things that nullify the fast, as we mentioned, there are two types. There are things that the person, the sa'im, does to increase his strength, and there may be things that the sa'im does which causes his strength to deplete. Now, so, for example, eating and drinking would fall under which category? Increase in strength. Now, whilst the person having sexual relations would fall into which category? Decrease in strength. So, essentially, the Sa'im should not enter anything into the body, nor expel anything from the body. The Sa'im should not enter anything into the body, nor expel anything from the body, by way of his eye willfully. So this is why there's a distinction made between the person that vomits, yani the one that regurgitates in an involuntary manner, and the one that does so voluntarily. Why? Because it's a voluntary act. If the person regurgitates, he throws up, and it is not of his own volition, so he didn't intend to do so, then his fast is still sahih. His fast is still correct. Now, likewise, if the person was to vomit, voluntarily, then the fast is nullified. Now, so this is also the case when it comes to the eating and drinking. The eating and drinking. How can a person eat involuntarily?
By cooking.
By cooking.
No,
I think you might need to elaborate on that one a bit more.
like, you say eat without wanting to eat.
Involuntarily, yeah. How does a person eat
When they,
involuntarily?
like, when they try the food for taste.
Okay. And then it gets...
Like, you don't eat it, you don't swallow
So
it.
I don't cook, so it's...
You
I get what you're saying, though. I've seen people do it.
Yeah.
Now, so a person may be involuntarily, they try to taste the food and they swallow it. It's an example. Could be an example. What else? Forgetfulness, essentially. Now, a person forgets that they're fasting, and then they eat. Now, they eat, and they forget that they're fasting. Likewise as well, Ibn Qudama mentions that a person, for example, he finds that a fly flies into his throat. Or, for example, the person is performing madmada with istishaq, and then water enters into the throat, into the stomach. In this scenario, this is involuntary, an involuntary act. For example, the person is not. No one is asking for a fly to enter to their throat. Wallah. Now, and when a person is performing wudu, now they perform the actions of wudu, but then if the water enters, so then it's regarded as being involuntary. As long as what? As long as what though? Now, they were not excessive in the madmada wa istinshaq. As for madmada wa istinshaq, the gargling of the water, putting the water in the nose, putting the water in the mouth, outside of the hal of sawm, if the person is not fasting, then what is recommended, the person does this in large amounts. Or larger amounts. This was recommended. Except for if the person is fighting. Except for if the person is fasting. Kama qala Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if the person is fasting, then in this regard, they don't do that. So if they do it, so if they're excessive, and then they end up swallowing, it cannot now be said it's involuntary. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. However, if they were performing the actual wudu, and some water, maybe droplets, enter the stomach, then in this regard, it's not now said that this is a voluntary act. So, likewise as well, al-ihtilam. So the person has a wet dream. Again, this is involuntary. This is involuntary. Why? Because the person is sleeping. So now it cannot now be said that the person is held to account whilst they are sleeping. And these are just some of the examples of the things that break the person's fast. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Inshallah, we'll conclude with that. Barakallahu feekum. وجزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. Yeah. Fears for the child or herself as well. Because Ibn Qudamah mentions she fears for the child, but in the case of the pregnant woman, it could be a genuine fear for herself as well.
How does this opinion of the doctor coming into that, how does that work? Rather than, say for example, she feels unwell if she was fasting.
So if it's a case of, for example, the woman herself, due to pregnancy and the symptoms of pregnancy, she feels unwell, then she falls into the hukum of the one that's marid. Do you understand?
But then that marid, that would then fall into the one where you should make up.
They should make up, yeah.
You should make up.
But if now, for example, it's the case of it's her pregnancy and she fears for the child, then of course she's not aware of the hal of the child. No. And so she needs the khibra of the doctor to tell her, the experience of the doctor to tell her whether there's any issue with the child. You understand? She can't just say, I feel it in my bones. And because of that, I'm going to break my fast. No, not in this regard, she can't do that. No, it's the question asking about the pregnant woman and her hal. And the reality is that if she feels sick, then she enters into that ruling of the one that is marid. Now, if she feels sick due to the symptoms of pregnancy, she enters the ruling of the one that is sick. However, if there's genuine fear for the child, or it is feared for her, so she might not feel anything herself. However, or she might not feel anything untoward, let's say. However, the doctor, and as we discussed, this trustworthy doctor, he's mentioned that she is lacking particular nutrients, for example, and so she needs to eat on a regular basis. Then this is something else. This is, in this case, it enters into the ruling of the pregnant or the breastfeeding woman. Or the makes sense?
You know when they say about the trustworthy doctor?
Yes.
Like obviously, what about if the doctor is ignorant? So you will see many, obviously in the West,
Yeah.
when you could go to the doctor, they'll be a Muslim, or maybe, you know, they're not practicing Muslim.
Just go to Umar.
Go to who?
Let's do it.
Yeah,
No.
you know what I mean, isn't it? You find many that
No.
are not even practicing,
Yeah.
but they're Muslim. So
Yeah.
how would you see them as trustworthy? It's a bit difficult here, you know what I mean?
I understand. It's difficult because the majority of the doctors you're going to deal with are not going to be Muslim anyway.
Yeah.
Right? But generally speaking, when we say, you know, the one that's trustworthy, then it's from what is apparent, what is apparent to you, and what you can, the best that you can do in that regard. Generally speaking, though, one of the things we mentioned is that the person has. We mentioned trustworthiness. That was the first thing we mentioned. Also, we mentioned that from the benefits of him being Muslim is that he understands the fadl of fasting and the importance of fasting in Islam. So even the example you're giving, where you get maybe a lot of people, they may be jahil, a lot of people know about fasting and Ramadan. Now, the person, he may be jahil in a lot of ahkam. When it comes to Ramadan, he knows about Ramadan. Now, and so this is, even though it's not everything, it helps. Now, and it's something which is, if you had the choice, of course, you'd lean towards that particular doctor. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Now, no.
I had a question about the traveller. So, what does the minimum distance have to be counting for
Traveling.
and then does university, like, going to study, is that permissible?
Okay. There's two questions there.
Yeah.
No problem. You're stuck in the second. So, now, as for the first question about what is the distance for the traveller, then there's discussions around specific distances. let's say if you go this amount of distance and you're a traveller, and the likes of that. What Allah Ta'ala knows best is the stronger opinion is that the traveller is regarded as being a traveller based upon the urf, based upon the custom of the people. Meaning, when it's understood by the custom of the people that you've left your location, right? So if you've left your location, then it could be said, okay, this is you've travelled. So, Abu Khalid's not here, alhamdulillah. Because when we was discussing it before, Abu Khalid, he was going back and forth about what is travelling when you're in Manchester. Now, and Allah Ta'ala knows best, but generally say Manchester is when you've left Greater Manchester. Anything that is regarded as being Greater Manchester, if you've left that, then you're a traveller. Now, so anything within Manchester where we are now, which is just normal Manchester, any of the surrounding areas, Salford, Trafford, Rochdale, Oldham, Bolton, all of that would still be regarded as being Greater Manchester. A lot of times we're from Bolton. No.
Is it just the urf? Is it the Muslims or is it just the people?
It's you'd say it goes back to the Muslims, but generally when it's the land of the non-Muslims, it's what is understood to be that place, that location. Now, and so it's in general, Allah Ta'ala knows best. It is quite general. Now, where it's what is understood to be in that particular land, but no doubt, what is the urf amongst the Muslims will take precedence if there is a difference. But generally speaking, it'll be one and the same, one and the same. So, we said here, Greater Manchester is what we say is the location. Allah knows best. London, where I'm from, is basically anything inside the M25, the ring road that goes all the way around London. Anything inside that, you're in London. Once you're outside of that, then you're not really in London.
So like for me, like I go Leeds from Bolton to Leeds. So that's of course I'm assuming is in travelling.
Yes.
So just to confirm, did you say it's better for the traveller to break the fast and then make it up? Is it better? Is it more rewarding that or?
So it's better because you're taking the allowance. Now you're taking the allowance. However, what I would say is a caveat to that though, is if a person knows that they're going to be travelling, let's say for example every day,
yeah,
right, and even though it's better for them to take the allowance, they are aware that if they're going to travel every day, that they're not going to fast any of these days, and then there's going to be a hardship because they have to make it up, and they recognise there's going to be a hardship to make up those 30 days, 29, 30 days. Then they should have continued with their fast in that regard as well. Now, and so there is some slight difference if you like. So even though it's better for them to do it, if now it causes them a greater hardship in the long run, then they should fast. Why? Because the whole reason why you have that rukhsa allowance is to remove the hardship. Now, so if you're going to, by way of removing that hardship initially, you're going to cause a greater one further down the line, then of course you adhere to that which is easier first and foremost, which will be to fast. Now, as for your second question about university, with the discussion around university, there are major issues with a person attending university, and the two major issues you would say are how they fund it, how they fund their attendance, which is generally speaking a person who may attend university using student loans. These student loans are based upon riba, based upon interest. It's not permissible. Even though people say, but you don't have to pay it back, or you have to pay it back once you earn a certain amount, or once you die, then it's written off. That's not the point. The point, when it comes to riba, and it shows you the evil of riba, anything associated with it is haram. Now, it's not just the person taking it and the person paying it. Now, that's not the case. As I mentioned in the hadith, the Messenger of Allah, la'an, he mentioned, sallallahu the la'an, the curse be upon not only the one that takes it or pays it, also the one that is the wakil in that regard. So the one that maybe does it on behalf of another individual, and the shahidain, so the witnesses to it, as well as the katib, the one that writes that contract. So anything to do with riba, and anyone that touches it, now any form of touching of the riba is haram. Now, so imagine he's not paying riba, Nor is he taking it, but he wrote the contract. Now the curse is upon that individual as well. Or let's say, for example, you have a normal transaction, and it's recommended a normal transaction. Let's say, for example, I lent you money. It'd be good to get 2 witnesses, right? However, if this transaction is a riba transaction, and those 2 witnesses are present, then the curse is upon them as well. So it shows you anyone that touches it, that comes near it, now, then there's harm upon them. That's one thing. The second is, in relation to the universities, is the affair of ikhtilat, the free mixing. Now, the free mixing. And no doubt, with this action of, or with this affair of free mixing comes much evil and much harm. And a person really and truly, if they wish to safeguard themselves, they need to really, distance themselves from this affair of free mixing. The person doesn't know, first and foremost, how their heart will be affected. And the person doesn't know, for example, what the effect of lowering the gaze, or the lack of lowering the gaze, may cause upon the heart as well. A person may be lowering the gaze on one occasion, another occasion doesn't. And it may just seem as something basit to him, something small and simple to him at that occasion, but then it grows bigger later on. Allah Ta'ala knows best. Now, so without saying and preceding anyone to say that it's outright haram, now there are specific issues with it. With those 2 main issues, if a person can somehow mitigate for those, then fabiha wa ni'ma, then get the qualification you need to get. So, for example, the person is able to fund it themselves. For example, if the person is able to go on a course where there isn't much free mixing, or they're able to study distance learning now, and the qualification still avails them, is still of benefit to them, then this is something that they should look at. But it should not be a thing where the person is lax with it. That's the point. The main point is that the person should not be lax with it, and shouldn't just go and do whatever, go to whichever university, whichever course, fund it, whichever way that they think that they can fund it, and feel as though this is a means of salama. No. The person should not allow as well for the shaitan to enter into their thinking and their contemplations. For example, what you find and you hear from a lot of the ikhwan, sometimes akhawat, the sisters, the brothers and sisters as well, is that they will say, I need to get this degree so that I can leave this country. I need to get this degree so I can get a job abroad. And that's fine. However, al-ghaya la tabarrir al-wasila. The ends doesn't justify the means. So just because you want to maybe attain this noble act of hijrah and leaving these lands and going to the lands of the Muslimin, it doesn't now mean that it justifies all the means to get there. Just like a person, al-aqil, the one of sound mind, is never going to say, I need to make a hijrah, I need money, so I'm thinking about going to local Halifax and robbing it. No one's going to say, I'm going to go to rob this bank, and so I can make enough money so I can make hijrah. No one's going to say that. No. So then, when it comes to all of these other evils in the middle, we're not going to say now, just because I need to attain that good, I'm going to do all of these evils to attain it. Of course not. So it's really about, in summary, a person being diligent, doing their due diligence when it comes to whichever courses they're doing, how they're funding it, where they're going, what they're doing, in order to attain whatever they wish to attain. So remember as well, all of these things are from the dunya, and a person really should be well aware that Allah Ta'ala is watching his actions, and well aware of that which resides within the heart, and should strive to purify his heart and his actions in everything that he does. Allah Ta'ala was best.
Ustad, that now you've just mentioned that. What about now?
Which one, the back robbery?
With the uni, yeah.
No.
The robbery, another robbery.
It's haram by the
yeah.
way.
So basically, imagine now we'll go a bit forward. The person's already done that now.
Okay.
So he went to uni, got the riba, he's graduated, now he's in his career.
Yes.
He's in that mess now. He didn't know, or he did know, and he still went down that route. Now he's in this mess. what actions should he take now to try to rectify his affairs?
Okay. So he's already started, he's already done everything.
Yes.
So then first and foremost, he should seek to pay off the debt as quickly as he can. He should make tawbah. But if he's working in a career that's halal, he continues in that which is halal. But he seeks to make tawbah, and of course, with that tawbah, is that he has regret for what he's fallen into. He's left off that which he's done, which inshallah he would have, but not taken any more loans or debts. Now, and he so he has the azima, and he has the azima not to return to it as well. So he has the determination that he's not going to ever return to doing that again. That's his tawbah. As for him in his actual career, or his actual debt, he should strive to get rid of that debt as quickly as he can. Now, so it's not upon his head. The problem with these debts, though, these student loan debts, and debts like this, like mortgages as well. Now, like mortgages, no, mortgages from the French word mort, like death. So it's understood that this debt is meant to be with you till you die. Now, so a lot of these debts are legacy debts. Now, so with the fact that a person has these particular debts now, is that it's not understood that they're going to be able to pay them off. Now, and a lot of them, especially these larger ones. That's why they say that if you die, it's written off. Because in a lot of the cases, they expect you to die before you pay it. Now, and so with these particular debts, the person strives to the best of his ability, but it may be a case he may not be able to pay it off, because there is an expectation that a large amount of people won't be able to pay them off. Now, and the evil with these debts is that the debt itself becomes a commodity. Now, the debt itself becomes a product, and so it's sold to others. So the debts a person has, it's not the fact that they're not actually expected to pay it off, but it becomes a commodity that they can sell on to others. Now, so the reason I mention all of that is the fact that the paying off of the debt may become a difficulty, but it should not be the preventative factor in anything else that they wish to do, right? But they should continue in what they're doing in their career, strive to pay off that debt, and of course make tawbah for whatever they've fallen into before, and beware of those du'at, those evil callers that call people to actually taking on these particular debts. From them, this individual Hakeem, Haddad, and the likes of them, that will say that it's permissible to take student loans and whatever else. And then they have these individuals, they have the action of these individuals upon their head. May Allah Ta'ala protect us from that. So it's a must that the person really and truly seeks to relieve himself of that as soon as he can, inshallah.
One last question, sorry, Ustad.
No.
One last. Now you've got so much debt, and then obviously in England now they say things like you can do bankruptcy, file for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
You know, where they wipe all the debts and
Yeah.
how is
It comes
this-
at a cost.
Yeah. How does Islam see this? How does that work within Islam?
You should file for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I don't know all the ins and outs of the legislation regarding bankruptcy. But if bankruptcy is, in simple terms, as I understand it to be, then it is something which, if a person does by necessity, they can do so. And the debt is written off as well. So whoever you have a debt with, they make tanazul on that. They relieve you of that debt. Obviously, they relieve you of that debt, and it comes at a cost to you and your credit score, and all that other stuff. But if now the debtor, or the creditor, so the one that you owe, has relieved you of the debt, then the debt is relieved. Now, and so they're relieved of the debt due to, I believe, legislation, because you now have said, I have no money to give you, so they have to relieve you of their debt. Now, and so, but if now they have relieved you of the debt, then there's no longer any debt. Allah Ta'ala knows best. Yani, whether it be in the legislation or Sharan as well. Yeah.
But does it not matter, like, for example, if, like, say someone owes me money.
Someone owes you money, yeah.
For example, I'm some big finance company or whatever,
Yes.
and then they file for bankruptcy, and the debt gets written off, because it has to, legally.
Yeah.
but I'm still not happy with that. I want my money. Now I've got no means of getting it back. But Islamically, do they still not owe me money?
Most apparent that it would, but then because now if the legislation has wiped that away, then that would be the kind of the end of that dealing. However, that's why when it comes to Islam and debts, there's so much more like done in terms of paying the debts. For example, you have the guarantor, or you have the collateral, or you have what is referred to as hajar. Hajar is where your money is seized. Now, so the state seizes your money, and what they do with that is that they will give you your money, give you a portion of your money, which suffices for you whatever you need to live with. The other is that the rest of it they give to paying off your debts. So these are the things that are established in the Sharia. Now, so there are ways that that these things are established. However, if we're talking about what is owed essentially through these other means, then Allah Ta'ala knows best. But most apparently, it would be a case of that is written off because the Qanun has written it off. Allah knows best.
And then if a person has a contract, for example, it has riba or something else that's haram within the contract, and they're able to. So, for example, a person borrows £1,000 from someone.
Yes.
And then they agree to pay them back £1,200.
So a person borrows £1,000 and agrees to pay back £1,200. Okay.
Then, is it haram for them to pay back £1,000 and then not pay back the other 200 once they realize it's haram? If they can avoid any liability, for example, anything that will harm them.
Then yeah, they should pay back whatever they've taken, even though they've agreed, but any condition, as is mentioned in the hadith, any condition that's not in the book of Allah, then it is rejected. So that condition, which is ribawi, where they've asked for the extra £200 in this scenario, then it's rejected. So then the person doesn't pay that back. The only reason why we say in his other loan, the person seeks to pay it all back as soon as he can, because he's liable for the whole thing. Now there's liability on the whole debt. Now, barakallahu feekum, ikhwan. Jazakumullah khair. وصلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.